You've probably heard a story like this before. It's one of those ancient, almost archetypal tales that feels like it's been woven into our DNA. It's a story about destiny, about power, and a child who starts out with absolutely everything stacked against them. So, picture this. A baby boy is born into a world that wants him dead from the start. His very existence is a death sentence. His mother, absolutely terrified but also incredibly brave, manages to hide him for the first 3 months of his life. But you can't hide a baby forever. So in this last-ditch effort, this act of pure desperation and hope, she takes a reed basket, makes it waterproof, places her son inside, and just lets him go, adrift on a huge river. She's basically leaving his fate in the hands of the current. And then something incredible happens. The basket floats downriver until it's found, and you'll never guess by who? A princess. She sees the baby, takes him in, and raises him as her very own son in the royal palace. This kid, who was supposed to be dead, is now in line to rule a massive empire. It's the ultimate rags to riches story, right? Destiny fulfilled against all odds. You know this story. But whose is it exactly? So if you were thinking this is the story of Moses, you're not alone, but it isn't. This is actually the origin story of Sargon the Great, the ruler of the Akkadian Empire, and he lived more than 1,000 years before Moses was even born. And that little detail, well, it changes everything. I mean, it's just wild, isn't it? The fact that these two massive historical figures have almost the exact same dramatic origin story is fascinating. But what's even more fascinating is how their paths completely split. One story is about gaining a kingdom. The other story, well, it begins by giving one up. Just look at this. Their stories are practically a mirror image. Humble birth, facing death, saved by royalty, raised in a palace. It's all the same. Until you get to that last line. And that's the whole ballgame. For Sargon, getting pulled from the river is the start of his climb to the top. It's an ascent. For Moses, his life in the palace is just the setup for his decision to walk away from it all. His journey is a descent from the throne down into the desert. And that's the thing. Sargon's story pretty much ends where Moses' story truly begins. Moses' story is all about a single choice, this one moment of decision that completely redefines who he is and what his life is about. And get this. This wasn't some impulsive teenage rebellion. The sources say Moses was 40 years old. 40. He had spent decades living as a prince, with all the power, education, and comfort you could imagine. This was a choice he made as a mature adult. And it wasn't just him being curious like, hey, I'll go see how the other half lives. The original language hints at something way deeper. It says the impulse to care for his people came upon his heart. It's painted as this divine calling, this profound weight of responsibility that he just couldn't shake anymore. This quote just nails the internal struggle, doesn't it? He didn't just feel bad for them. He made a conscious refusal. He actively rejected the name, the title, the identity that gave him all his privilege. He chose to face hardship with the oppressed over enjoying all the perks of his position. So he's at this fundamental crossroads, a question that I think we all face in our own ways. Are you going to align yourself with the powerful or with the powerless? Are you going to live as a prince of Egypt or as a brother to a slave? That choice would define the rest of his life. But here's the thing. Making a noble choice doesn't automatically mean you get a noble outcome. In fact, for Moses, his decision immediately blows up in his face. His attempt to connect with his people backfires spectacularly. Yeah, the fallout was swift and it was brutal. He sees a slave being beaten, he steps in, he kills the Egyptian guard. But the very next day, he tries to break up a fight between two of his own people, and they throw it right back in his face. Suddenly, his secret's out, Pharaoh is after him, and the prince of Egypt is now a fugitive, running for his life into the wilderness. Ouch. Can you just imagine the sting of those words? He just threw away a life of unimaginable privilege to stand with them, and their first response is to be suspicious and reject him. The very people he chose as his own are the ones who expose him. So this is where the story really challenges our idea of what success even means. By any worldly standard, Sargon is the success story. At this point, Moses' life looks like an absolute failure, but the narrative is asking us to look a little deeper. And here's the crucial point. This wasn't seen as a loss. It was a deliberate trade. He sized up the treasures of Egypt, all the gold and power and status, and decided that the disgrace of identifying with his people was actually worth more. Why? Because he was looking ahead to a different kind of reward, one that you can't count or hold. So you have these two myths, born from the same basic idea, but they lead down two completely opposite roads. The Sargon myth is all about getting worldly power. The Moses story is about identifying with the powerless. One values thrones and treasure, the other values solidarity and purpose. And just look at their legacies. One is the cool historical footnote, the other is a story that has been fueling liberation movements for thousands of years. And let's be honest, the Sargon myth is the one our culture celebrates all day, every day. It's the lottery ticket, the startup that goes viral, the dream of going from nothing to having it all. Our world is built around the story of the person who gets the crown. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to chew on. Sargon's story ends with him putting on a crown. Moses' story really begins the moment he decides to take his off. So which one of those lives, which one of those stories is actually the successful one?